December 21st, 2020, in the municipality of Guarujá, everything changed forever. That was the day Márcia Lanzane, 66 years old, had her life brutally interrupted by the person least expected, her son, Bruno Eustáquio, then 24 years old. The scene unfolds like an intense drama. Footage from the home's security system, later found hidden inside the oven, reveals the moment mother and son engage in a physical struggle. Bruno enters his mother's bedroom, applies pressure to her neck, and, by all indications, she succumbs to asphyxiation. Bruno is Márcia's son, and Joel's grandson. Joel is a retired military police officer who was not present at the time. Born and raised in Guarujá, Bruno always seemed ambitious. He earned a law degree and dreamed of going to medical school, but according to police, he never followed through on that plan. He desired a lifestyle beyond his family's means and pressured his mother to sell the house and buy a more expensive property thing she refused to do unless he contributed work or income. The morning after the incident, security cameras show Bruno going to the gym and later calling his aunt Minavina to say his mother was all purple, blaming an alleged fading spell. He initially claimed that Márcia had fallen after being pushed, then changed his story to a heart attack or head injury. However, an autopsy determined the cause was mechanical asphyxiation, which altered the trajectory of the case and prompted a more thorough investigation. Investigators recovered the DVR from the security cameras by Bruno inside the oven, a detail that seemed lifted from a thriller. The footage showed Bruno holding his mother down, kneeling on her body, and applying pressure to her neck, before moving to the living room to watch TV and have a drink. Notably, he entered and exited her room at least once during the night. The chilling contrast between the act and Bruno's behavior sleeping normally that night and going to the gym the next morning shocked investigators. The motive, a material desire so strong it overrode familial bonds. He allegedly acted to secure the inheritance and collect his mother's life insurance according to the public prosecutor's office. What surprised forensic experts and prosecutors most wasn't just the coldness with which things were carried out, but the preparation beforehand and what happened afterward. During the investigation, it emerged that days before the incident, Bruno had researched asphyxiation, inheritance, procedures, and ways to hide evidence. Prosecutors believe it wasn't an impulsive act, but a carefully planned one. That discovery completely changed the course of the investigation and shook the family, who until then refused to believe Bruno could have been involved. Bruno even attended his mother's wake, comforting relatives and friends. According to reports, he cried, expressed disbelief, and said he felt lost. But investigators saw this behavior as wildly inconsistent with the physical evidence, and after the funeral he began pressuring family members about accessing the house and his mother's assets. Relatives reported he was agitated, trying to settle inheritance matters with unusual haste for the situation. The situation escalated when investigators searched the house and discovered the DVR hidden inside the oven. The device contained footage of what happened that December night. Bruno was then taken into preventive custody and transferred to the São Vicente Detention Center. In his statements, he offered different versions of what happened, raising even more suspicion. His defense claimed the young man suffered from mental disorders and requested psychiatric evaluations, suggesting he had acted without full awareness. However, the official reports did not support incapacity. On the contrary, everything pointed to coldness, premeditation, and an apparent attempt to control the narrative from the outset. The prosecution, led by attorney Marcos Cambronelli, detailed that Bruno had a direct interest in his mother's assets, including 2 life insurance policies in her name. This added another layer to what appeared to be a plan motivated by greed. With each new forensic report and testimony, the accident or emotional breakdown theory faded, leaving only the image of a dark, calculated plan executed in silence. As the process progressed, more questions emerged, many unanswered. Why did he hide the DVR in the oven? What did he expect would happen next? Above all, what kind of relationship did he really have with his mother? Neighbors recalled that days before, the two had intense discussions about financial matters, especially the sale of the house where they lived together. Márcia, they said, was a hard-working, discreet woman who worked in human resources and was highly respected by her colleagues. Bruno, despite his law degree, never practiced and spent most of his time at home, dissatisfied with his own reality. During the trial, one detail that caused shock was that Bruno tried to access his mother's life insurance just days after the event. This reinforced suspicions that it was no accident. Relatives also said he had discussed inheritance matters with lawyers even before the funeral. All of this weakened the defense's version. When the jury trial took place in March 2023, Bruno remained calm. almost indifferent. He denied all charges and maintained it was a tragic accident. But the jury's opinion was unanimous. He was found guilty. The verdict was announced late at night. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison, in a closed regime, for killing out of a futile motive, with no chance for the victim to defend herself. But the case didn't end there. After the conviction, the defense appealed, claiming the trial was unfair, influenced by media pressure, and that Bruno was being judged more by public opinion than by facts. That appeal is still ongoing, keeping the case technically alive. Meanwhile, family members and neighbors continue to live with the trauma. The house, once peaceful and welcoming, has become a symbol of an unimaginable event. Márcia was known as a serious, helpful woman deeply devoted to her family. Nothing in her past foreshadowed such a sudden, extreme end, especially not at the hands of her own son. Today, the house remains empty. The neighbors avoid talking about it, but many still walk slowly past the gate, as if searching for answers in the silence of the yard. For some, justice has been served. For others, the question remains. What was really going through Bruno's mind that night? Was it sheer greed that drove him to break every boundary? Even after the sentence, unease lingers around the Márcia Lanzane case. A deep layer of silence and discomfort haunts those who knew her, as if each person is still trying to piece together a puzzle that no longer forms a complete picture. The beachfront town of Guarujá, once defined by a quiet routine, now bears a scar exposed by national news and the hushed conversations of neighbors and co-workers. From her early life until that point, Márcia's path was one of effort. Born and raised in town, she earned a business administration degree and worked for years in human resources. Colleagues described her as calm, yet determined, dedicated, and caring towards younger co-workers. As a single mother, she raised Bruno almost alone, with support from some relatives, especially his grandfather Joel, whom Bruno regarded as a second father figure. Bruno, on the other hand, displayed a mix of intelligence and impatience. Despite his law degree, he never worked in the field. Witnesses say he had ambitions that outgrew his ability, wanted a high standard of living without matching effort, spending long hours locked in his room and rejecting jobs he considered beneath his training. The contrast between mother and son was stark. While she worked tirelessly to make ends meet, he withdrew and fed grandiose projects that never came to fruition. During the process, an astounding point was that Bruno tried to claim Márcia's life insurance days after the incident. This further reinforced the suspicion it wasn't accidental. Family members said he even discussed inheritance matters with lawyers before the funeral. All these details collectively undermined the defense's story. The jury, faced with compelling evidence, especially the recovered footage from the oven, had no doubts. But even with the conviction, many questions remain. Main among them, why would someone do this to their own mother, with whom they lived every day and had no evident history of violence? Was it an uncontrolled outburst of rage, an emotional collapse, or a meticulously plotted plan? Perhaps the only person who truly knows is Bruno himself, who has remained withdrawn ever since. His lawyers continue to insist the facts were exaggerated and the trial tainted by public emotion. But for those left behind, especially Márcia's relatives, the pain finds no solace in that argument. Time has passed, but Márcia Lanzane's presence still lingers, as if her absence still has something to say. Her bedroom remains locked. Possessions, untouched clothes in the closet, work papers on the desk, framed photos of her and Bruno on the furniture. Everything remains as if frozen in time. What shocks relatives most is not only what happened, but how it was followed by cold, almost unreal behavior. Asphyxiation Bruno allegedly showed no emotion. His coldness, police said, was surgical. In subsequent hearings after the conviction, lawyers presented psychological reports suggesting traits of personality disorders, like extreme narcissism and lack of empathy. However, the judge determined that, even if some disorder existed, Bruno had full awareness of his actions. This was supported by witnesses saying he manipulated situations to his advantage, skillfully crafting different versions of events. One mysterious detail: the gap between the footage showing the confrontation and Bruno's first contact with family. For nearly 6 hours, he remained inside the house in silence while the events unfolded without anyone knowing. Police never determined exactly what occurred in that interval, but it's known that during that time he removed the DVR and hid it in the oven, an act that showed intent to cover up what happened. The defense tried to use that interval to suggest he was in shock, paralyzed by an emotional collapse. But investigators countered. He acted methodically. He washed dishes, locked the door, went to the gym, returned, called his aunt. No sign of emotional breakdown. The public trial was harsh, Social media was flooded with indignation. Mane Beopli started following every detail as if every new finding cast new light on an incomplete mystery. And even now, with Bruno already convicted, doubts have not vanished. Why? Why did it happen inside a home, between mother and son, between two people, who, on the surface, seemed to have normal family disagreements? Bruno's behavior, his silence, his little gestures afterward, they still leave an unsettling trail. Even those close to him hesitate to talk. It's as though broaching the subject would awaken something dark. And that has made this case one of the most impactful in São Paulo's coastal region in years. Now, nearly 5 years later, the case of Márcia Lanzane is still mentioned as one of the most remarkable and hard-to-digest episodes in Guarujá's recent memory. The 28-year closure regime sentence for Bruno Eustáquio Vieira remains in force. But the legal process is not entirely over. Appeals had been filed seeking a reduced sentence or a new trial, keeping the case technically underway. In practice, Bruno is serving his sentence in the São Paulo state prison system, separated from his family, which is itself fractured by silence and grief. His grandfather Joel, who raised Bruno like a son, has not made public statements since. The verdict? Close family friends say he withdrew completely, sold the house, and moved away soon after the trial. The house where it all happened remained closed for many months. Today, it sits empty, windows locked. The yard overgrown between cracked paths and an eerie sense of abandonment. Neighbors say that even now, many cross the street to avoid passing in front. For many, it's not just an empty building, as if the story itself is frozen. The absence of Márcia still echoes among her former colleagues, known for her dedication, organization, and generosity toward younger staff. On her birthday, many still leave subtle messages on social media, as if unwilling to allow time to erase what she meant. The community continues to try to understand how all this could happen so quietly, without clearer signs. Márcia's case became a symbol of what can happen when family conflicts go unaddressed, when emotional pressure and generational differences are ignored. And even after the formal sentencing, some say the true trial has not ended because many questions remain unanswered. What really was going on in Bruno's head that day? Had he planned for weeks? Or did everything explode in minutes? Was there a chance of reconciliation that was overlooked? If the family had acted earlier, could anything have been prevented? The formal system of justice has spoken, but the echo of this case still runs through the halls of popular imagination, and likely will for a long time to come. What do you think really happened to Márcia Lanzane? Share your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more mysteries like this.